You know, when we first got the idea to do a film about Eero Saarinen, I thought, you know, the architecture would be very interesting. I was trained as an architect. I always loved the idea of the Saarinen work. It was so iconographic in American architecture in the 50s. But we didn't really have a story. You can't make a story out of buildings. And so the project kind of floundered for a while. Nothing was getting done. When I called up Erik Saarinen here, who's the son of Eero Saarinen and a well-known director of photography in Hollywood who's done many wonderful feature films, all kinds of awards for commercials. I was excited because I thought he would be the ideal person to shoot it, obviously. And when I got him on the phone, he said, "Peter, no way, I don't want to have anything to do with your film on my father." So I was a little bit surprised. I didn't know why he said that, but I hung up the phone and I thought, well, now maybe we really probably do have our story, whatever that may lead us to.
Basically, I didn't like my father. I hated my father, in fact, for doing what he did on, you know, on a personal level. Your father, you know, kicks you out of the house, kicks your sister out of the house, your mother out of the house. He spent very little time with me as when I was young, and we'd play a little and then he'd go off work, and then he'd come back a month later and we'd play a little, then he'd go off to work.
Eventually, though, you called me back, I think, or you emailed me back a long email with that same kind of story. But said you were thinking about it, and maybe I'm going to change my mind. This may be a chance to, in a sense, find some closure, you know, on this story of not having anything to do with his dad for 50 years. As his career grew, he kind of knew very little, really, about Saarinen.
I read some letters that were in the Smithsonian, that personal letters of his, where it showed him falling in love. If somebody falls in love, you can't really stop that. You can't really blame somebody for doing that. I did at the time it happened, but you know, as I grew up and grew older, I didn't. But there was really literally a hole in my heart in terms of, you know, my father leaving and then somebody else, and then he died soon after. So I never thought about that it would be a cure for me to be able to embrace what he did, but I did realize that I could look at his buildings and really understand the kind of emotional part of why he did his buildings and his point of view.
Eero Saarinen had a very short career of working only a little more than 1 decade because he died very young. So there are only about 10 or 12 major buildings. So there's a storyline of the buildings, and there's a storyline that Erik just talked about in terms of his relationship to his father. And then there's this third story, which is really about this amazing love affair between Eero Saarinen and Aline Laukheim, who was a journalist, wrote pieces for the New York Times about his grandfather and then his father. It was really love at first sight, and we sort of tell that love story as well. So having that personal story thread along with the story of the architecture is really what I think made this into a documentary that's what average audiences want to see. They are not that interested in architecture, but they are interested in a human story and a real drama that took place here. Both of us together have probably made 200 projects, and this is the first time that I ever was involved in a project that used this particular kind of drone technology, using 6K format. It was a set of beautiful prime lenses that were pretty much used on the drone and on the other equipment. So what was your original thinking when you thought about how we were going to see the architecture? How did you originally think of capturing that, and what sort of technology did you bring to it?
Well, I thought this was a chance to put on film to describe what the architecture was, and to do it in an honest way, not to put my own look on it, or not to put my own color on it or anything like that, which is kind of what people do today in commercials. They want to make it expressive. They want to use their own expression. I figured if I can come away with the feeling that the buildings have, with their own genuine look, and also mimic what it's like to be in the buildings and put people's shoes in the buildings in the film, then I've done my job. We were using lenses that were extremely fast and 6K, which is a system that has very high dynamic range, which meant you can shoot in Eliel's house in the dark and it all comes out, or you can shoot in, well, let's say you can shoot in a natural situation without having to worry about lighting. We know that when we move through a building, we're getting a sense of perspective change during the shots, which we would never get if we used a locked-off camera. A locked-off camera is just pretty much like still photographs. My number one thought, and I think Peter agreed with us, was that to keep the camera moving through the architecture.
Everything is sort of designed to have a look as though you're seeing this through your own eyes. Even if you're a bird on the drone shots, it's still something that brings you into each space or into each building in a very realistic way. A lot of architectural photography is super wide angle, and then you actually go to the building and you don't even recognize the building because the photography is distorting the spatial aspects so much and the lighting so much. And we wanted in this film to really have the viewer have a realistic experience, like you are really in these spaces. And I think after a while you did so well with that you forget you're looking at a movie. You think you are moving through this architecture and experiencing all of the dimensions and feelings and emotion of it. And that comes down to some pretty technical choices, like choice of lens. It's going to be different on every shot depending on keeping that sort of realistic proportion going all the time. It was really a big project to get the drone up in the air. For example, the St. Louis Arch, 600 feet high, 60 stories high. The drone shots, some of which are above that, are in the flight path of planes coming into the St. Louis airport. Winds up there can be 100 miles an hour on bad days. And keeping these shots steady and beautiful and in places that no drones had ever gone before, like Dulles Airport in the TWA terminal, created a really unique thing that I don't think people have ever seen before in architectural photography.
This has to do with a stabilized camera. And the stabilization system had just come into being, where you could walk with a stabilized camera, you could put it on a radio-controlled car, a little cart that's like 2 feet long, and drones. We didn't really know exactly what the shots would be until we got there. And the shots were kind of self-evident once we got there, but how do you get it there? Well, if you have this little radio-controlled car, and you have a regular drone, and then you have a massive octocopter that can get very high-definition shots of, let's say, the GM Corporation, then you know that you're covered. I mean, it was really a matter of having the right tools and using those right tools for the right job, and then letting the job sort of dictate what tool you're going to use. By the time I was through, that I had evolved into a completely different person with a completely different understanding of and sympathy for what he did, and also his inspiration for other people. And it was a cathartic journey for me, and it was probably worth 20 years of therapy.
You know, this kind of movie touches on the artistic aspect of Saarinen's architecture, but on a deeper level it kind of touches an emotional level, and that's really what you try to reach with a film like this.
This was a whole journey for me. It wasn't just, okay, I'll do the film, and I did the film and we're done. It was kind of an experiment. We were on the edge. We went out there, and he gave me a microphone, and he had me talk, and he didn't know how I was going to do in front of the camera, and I didn't know either. I was very intensely scouting while he was very intensely filming me. It was unscripted, and it was really unforeseen, and I'm very thankful to Peter to have helped me through this. It's been 50 years of my life where I didn't have that assuredness that I do now, in terms of, just sort of self-esteem and things like that, having not helped my father or forgiven my father. Now it means a lot to me, and it also is a great thing that my own abilities have been able to help, throw them out there toward the future and hold them up for people in the future. So I'm very thankful for that and grateful for that.